Hey everyone, welcome to a deep dive on something that's really got people talking, transurfing. And look, we're not here to tell you this is some foolproof life hack, but the model laid out by Vadim Zeland, in his book Transurfing, it's definitely going to make you think.
It really makes you kind of question those times when you almost chose a different path, you
Yeah.
know? What if those weren't just fleeting thoughts, but like glimpses into different versions of your reality?
And that's where Zealand's coming from with this whole space of variations idea. We're diving right into the deep end. No need for basic analogies. You're already pretty familiar with the idea that our perceptions shape our reality. But what if there's actually a space where every single variation of our life, like every decision we could possibly made, actually exists?
Not just some abstract concept either. Zealand says they exist as like concrete sectors in this space of variations.
Okay.
It's wild, right?
Yeah.
Our thoughts are constantly scanning a cosmic radio dial, I guess you could say,
Mm.
locking onto a specific frequency that then becomes our reality.
See, this is what always gets me about transurfing. It sounds like something straight out of science fiction.
Yeah.
But then Zealand drops these ideas that almost, I don't know, they almost kind of make sense.
Right.
Like instead of picturing infinite realities, I think of those choose your own adventure books I used to love as a kid.
Yeah.
Each choice creates a new branch of the story. Is that way too simplistic a way to think about the space of variations?
I think it's a good starting point.
Yeah.
The key difference is with transurfing, all those potential branches already exist. It's not about creating new realities out of thin air. It's more like our focus determines which sector we experience. And that's where things get really, really interesting because according to Zealand, we're not always consciously choosing our focus.
You're talking about those pendulums he talks about, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's say I suddenly get this craving for a very specific brand of soda, right? And I swear I haven't even seen any ads for it anywhere. Is that a pendulum, like messing with my subconscious desires?
Yeah, that's actually a super relatable example. Think about it this way. Pendulums are like these entities that feed off our energy.
Mm-hmm.
And they could be corporations, they could be political movements, they could even be those like social media trends that kind of suck you in.
Yeah.
And they hook us with their energy, and then we become part of their system without even realizing it.
So how do we know if we're actually like genuinely being swayed by a pendulum versus, just wanting a soda on a hot day because it's hot?
That is the million-dollar question. Zealand would say that when a pendulum has its hooks in you, there's a certain emotional charge to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Think about maybe the last time you got sucked into some kind of heated online debate.
Oh, yeah.
Were you arguing from a place of genuine, like, conviction? Or was there a certain thrill you got, from proving your point, from being a part of that whole back and forth?
Okay, now I'm really starting to see how these pendulums actually work.
Yeah.
It's not always this like overt manipulation, but more like the subtle, like energetic pull. Like suddenly I'm not just scrolling past a political argument online. I need to jump in with like the wittiest comeback, even though 5 minutes ago I couldn't have cared less.
Exactly. And that, my friend, is the sound of a pendulum successfully latching onto your energy. You're no longer acting from like your own center. You're feeding into this system that thrives on that kind of engagement.
It can be kind of unsettling when you start to see these pendulums everywhere, right?
Yeah.
But before we spiral into like full-on paranoia, Zealand does offer us some ways to break free from these pendulums, right? It's not like we're just like doomed to be puppets in this cosmic play.
Absolutely. In fact, transurfing suggests that just becoming aware of these pendulums is the first step towards reclaiming your energy and actually like consciously choosing your path.
Okay, so how do we do that? How do we spot these pendulums before we get caught in their swing? And I guess more importantly, how do we actually break free?
And that's where we kind of shift gears from understanding the playing field to actually navigating it.
So we've established that these pendulums are like they're everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Subtly influencing our choices, kind of draining our energy. It's a little daunting, honestly.
Right.
But you mentioned that transurfing offers some ways to break free. So where do we even begin?
Well, like most things, it starts with awareness, right?
Right.
Zealand uses this analogy of a tram car.
Okay.
So imagine, this tram car, it's packed with people,
Okay.
and they're all intensely focused on something that's happening outside, right?
Okay. Okay, so I'm picturing this tram car. Are they all like looking at a celebrity or something? What's got them like laser focused?
It actually doesn't even matter what it is, and that's kind of the point, right?
Hmm.
Their energy is just totally absorbed by this external event. But then there's this one person on the tram, and they seem completely unaffected. They're just calmly reading a book, totally indifferent to all the commotion going on around them.
That's the transurfer, right?
Yes.
They've somehow managed to like tune out the collective frenzy.
Exactly. And it's not about being oblivious or anything. It's about recognizing when your energy is being pulled in a direction that doesn't actually serve you and having the awareness to just disengage.
So going back to like the online debate example, instead of like crafting that witty comeback, the transurfer would just like, I don't know, close the laptop, walk away from the computer entirely.
Precisely. It's about recognizing those moments where you're being triggered, where your ego is getting hooked, and just making that conscious choice to step off that pendulum swing,
It sounds simple enough,
right?
but I imagine it takes like a lot of practice to actually cultivate that level of like self-awareness to catch yourself in those moments before you get like swept away by the current.
It does, and that's where another key transurfing concept comes in, this idea of the warrior mentality.
Hmm.
Now, before you go, picturing yourself like donning armor and battling these pendulums head on.
Please tell me we're not going full-on gladiator here.
No, not at all. In transurfing, a warrior is simply someone who's aware of their choices and acts with intention. They don't get caught up in all the drama. They don't struggle against the current. They navigate it with a sense of like calm focus.
So more like a strategic chess player than like a raging berserker.
Exactly.
They're observing the board, they're anticipating the pendulum's moves, and choosing their own path accordingly.
Exactly. And the most powerful weapon in a transurfer's arsenal is their ability to choose where they direct their energy. Remember, pendulums, they thrive on our emotional reactions. So by staying neutral, by refusing to engage in their game, we essentially cut off their power supply.
It's like we're taking back control of our own like internal radio dial, right?
Yeah.
Tuning out the frequencies that no longer serve us.
Exactly.
But if we're not constantly like, being swayed by these pendulums, how do we actually navigate towards the life we want? Does transurfing offer any guidance on that front?
It does, and this is where it gets really, really exciting, actually. Transurfing suggests that there's this natural flow within the space of variations, right? It's like this current of favorable outcomes, that Zeland calls the wave of success.
Okay, now that sounds very intriguing, but also a little too good to be true. Are you saying that there's like this cosmic wave out there just waiting to carry us towards like our dreams?
Not exactly. It's not about, passive wishing or magical thinking.
Right.
It's about aligning your energy, your actions, with the outcomes that you desire, and then trusting that natural flow of the universe to guide you towards them.
So it's less about like paddling furiously towards a specific destination and more about like, I don't know, setting your intention, hoisting the sails, and then kind of allowing the wind to carry you in the right direction.
Beautifully put. And this is where transurfing gets really practical. It's about becoming aware of the subtle signs and synchronicities that are always guiding us. Those seemingly coincidental events, they just feel like they were like meant to be. You know what I mean?
Like when you're thinking about someone and then they call you completely out of the blue.
Yeah.
Or you stumble upon the perfect opportunity just when you need it most. Are those like signs that we're aligning with this wave of success?
They could be.
Okay.
But, it's important to remember that the universe doesn't always communicate in these like super obvious ways, right?
Right.
Sometimes the signs are a lot more subtle.
Okay.
Maybe it's just a gut feeling or a sudden like burst of inspiration or even an unexpected challenge that forces you to grow and evolve.
So how do we learn to decipher those signs? How do we differentiate between like a genuine intuitive nudge versus, I don't know, just wishful thinking?
That's the art of transurfing. It's learning to trust your intuition, to pay attention to those subtle cues and synchronicities, and to act on them even when it doesn't necessarily make logical sense.
It's about like silencing that inner critic, that voice of doubt that's telling us we're being silly or naive, and instead like listening to that deeper wisdom that knows what's truly best for us.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And the more you practice this, the easier it becomes. You start to recognize the patterns. You start to recognize the subtle ways in which the universe is always communicating with you,
Okay, I'm starting to understand the mechanics of it all. This interplay between our intentions, this wave of success, our ability to like decipher the signs. But what about those times when it feels like we're veering off course, Like we're hit with unexpected challenges or setbacks. How does transurfing help us to navigate like those rough waters?
That's where the true power of that warrior mentality really comes into play. It's about facing those challenges with courage, with resilience, with this unwavering faith in the process.
So we're riding this wave of success, right? We're paying attention to all the signs, and then bam, life throws a curveball.
Yeah.
Suddenly feels like we're like battling against the current. How do we reconcile that with this whole idea of like trusting the flow?
Right. And that's where we need to remember that this wave of success, it's not about a life that's completely free of any obstacles, right?
Right.
It's more like, navigating a river. There's going to be bends in the river. There might be some rapids. You might even encounter a fallen tree blocking your path.
Right.
But the river itself, the river always keeps flowing.
Okay, I like that analogy. So those obstacles aren't necessarily like signs that we veered off course, but
No.
they're more like just part of the journey itself.
Exactly. And oftentimes those challenges, they're actually opportunities in disguise. They force us to kind of reevaluate our path,
Mhm.
to strengthen our resolve, and sometimes they even lead us to discover a more fulfilling route that we hadn't even considered before.
So instead of getting discouraged or even, giving up completely, the transurfer sees those obstacles as kind of like a chance to flex those warrior muscles we were talking about, like
Yeah,
to remember that they actually have the strength and the resilience to navigate whatever comes their way.
precisely. It's about shifting our perspective.
Yeah.
Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? It's more about asking, like, okay, what can I learn from this? How can I use this experience to evolve and grow?
So there's no such thing as failure in transurfing. There's only feedback. Just another signpost on this kind of winding path toward our chosen reality.
That's a great way to put it. Transurfing emphasizes this idea that we are always learning, we're
Mhm.
always evolving, and every experience we have, whether it's positive or negative, it all contributes to our growth.
It's like that saying, like sometimes you win, sometimes you learn, right? But even with that empowered mindset, I imagine there are times where it's really difficult to see the forest for the trees, to trust the universe has some kind of grand plan, especially when things just feel really messy and uncertain.
Oh, absolutely. And that's where cultivating a sense of trust and even surrender comes in. Transurfing, it's not about trying to micromanage and control every single aspect of our reality. It's more about aligning ourselves with the natural flow and trusting that we are being guided towards our highest good, even when it doesn't seem like it.
So it's more of a collaborative dance with the universe than like a solo performance where we're setting our intentions, we're taking inspired action, but we're also kind of surrendering to the mystery a little bit, trusting that sometimes the greatest gifts come in the most unexpected packages.
Beautifully put. It's about holding our desires lightly, with an open hand, rather than clinging to them, with a clenched fist.
So, as our deep dive into transurfing comes to a close here, if there's like one key takeaway our listeners could kind of glean from all of this, what would it be?
That reality is far more malleable, far more, I guess, flexible than we've been led to believe. And by understanding the mechanics of the space of variations, by recognizing those pendulums that might be trying to influence us, and then by cultivating that warrior mentality to choose our own path consciously.
We actually empower ourselves to become conscious creators of our own lives, right? Surfing those waves of possibility toward a reality that's in alignment with our deepest truth and our purpose. It's a really powerful concept, and it's certainly given us a lot to ponder.
Indeed. And remember, this is really just the beginning of the exploration. The real magic, it happens when you actually start applying these principles in your own life, experimenting, observing, discovering what works best for you.
As always, we encourage you to, delve deeper into the source material yourself, Vadim Zeland's Transurfing, and continue your own personal exploration of this really fascinating concept.
Until next time, happy surfing.